This is Abe Freetanzer from cinemadailyus.com, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with Carla Gugino about the fall of the House of Usher. How are you, Carla?
I am really well. How are you doing, Abe?
Good, good. This is obviously a very meaty role. How did you first learn about it?
Yes, indeed. Well, Mike Flanagan, who I have collaborated with several times and love working with, probably a year or so before this came to fruition, he said he wanted to do the Fall of the House of Usher, and he was sort of going to build it all around Poe. And at that point, I didn't even know any of the rest of the story other than he said, "Would you be interested in playing the Raven?" Um, and uh, And, I said, yes, in about 30 seconds. And then I started seeing as it was unfolding, he was sending me the scripts as he was writing them. And it went from me being incredibly thrilled and absolutely absorbed with the complexity of this task to finishing the last episode, reading it, thinking, now I'm just actually 1,000% terrified of how I will pull this off. And if I don't, the show doesn't work. And so it was, I set about um, a really interesting challenge because, you don't often get to play different characters, but certainly this was even sort of an additional unusual challenge because it needed to be one character with several different incarnations. So it was about finding these 7 or 8 outlets of this one entity, this one being. And so it became for me about that golden thread that connected all of them so that she manifests in a certain way, in the way that people are able to see her, how she can best get through to that person. But hopefully we will always feel that, if you look deep enough, you'll find Verna.
I mean, that's really interesting. I also, watching the show, it's like so part of it seems like a Succession style family
Right.
drama. And then, especially in the early episodes, at the very end, you show up and things take a very dark supernatural turn.
Yeah.
What was the filming schedule like? How were you shooting in comparison to everyone else?
Well, yeah, I do love that, the tonal combinations of that, because it's so unusual. Um, it was interesting because initially I know that Mike was there was talk about doing it in sequence, which would have been an amazing way to sort of have it all unfold. But because in general it's so difficult to shoot things in sequence, it's just ends up being prohibitive. So on several occasions, I had 2 different versions of Verna to do on the same day. So that was a really unique challenge. Um, and it was and in fact, and then the bar scenes, which we see obviously sporadically throughout, this sort of the one that tips you in, the one where you're in the middle, and then the one where you finally get the reveal. Those were all shot towards the end um, of my shooting period, but I was there for about 5 months, and and it was definitely it was really helpful to do work, both work on the physicality and sort of the different places that these characters these incarnations are coming from, because it was about sort of turning on a dime and making it feel like, for myself to be able to pop in and out of them very quickly.
You have a favorite incarnation?
Well, I mean, Verna can't play favorites. Um, but I will say that, I think in Mask of the Red Death, I think in episode 2, that incarnation, with the blonde, and sort of this person who lived in this kind of multiple layers of sort of debauchery over many years, and I was really intrigued by her, and I think maybe just because she only has one scene, she's one of the characters the incarnations that I could definitely have explored longer.
Do you think fans have responded as anything particularly interesting to you?
Well, I think, I mean, it's so, I think because Mike really does always, that there are certain requirements for horror, obviously, which is that you or playing in the horror genre, because I don't even think this is straight up horror, but that you have to surprise people, scare them, and there are those basic requirements. And after that, you can really be as smart as you want to be and go as deep as you want to go. And I love that he always wants to go deeper. And so, I think that fans of his shows, and therefore I feel like the also the response to Verna and how I played her, are people who are wanting to be entertained, but who are also looking for sort of the deeper story there. So that's always very gratifying, that a lot of the things that I wanted to build in there, and felt that, you do the best work you can as an actor, and then you don't know if it will convey. You hope it will, but it's not even that it has to literally convey to what you were going for, but if people are able to, I think that a lot of people have commented on Verna's curiosity, and this sort of, what I never wanted her to be was a villain, which was very difficult to do considering that she is responsible for killing pretty much every character in the show. But I've loved that people have gotten that, and people have seen that there's this kind of, she doesn't have a your typical human morality. She doesn't wish for their deaths, and she is not, I mean, Henry Thomas's character, I mean, he pushes it a little far for her, but but she's doing a job, and she has this innate curiosity and belief that maybe once every moon, there will be a human being that decides to change their ways.
I like that. And I mean, you do a lot of horror, or at least horror adjacent. It seems like a genre that you feel very comfortable with.
Yeah, it's funny, I never have set out to do that. I love a great horror movie, just like I love a great romantic comedy or a great thriller. But I do gravitate towards people who are really exceptional at what they do. And I think when Mike and I first met on Gerald's Game, I had to make a decision. Someone else was cast in that early on, and I had to make a decision to jump in extremely quickly. And it was another sort of example of a role that I could just embarrass myself completely if it didn't work well, and if I couldn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. And in that first conversation with him, I felt like I really want to help this filmmaker bring their vision to life. And he's so clear, and he's interested in these large themes of denial, and awakening, and karma, and accountability, and empathy, and so I have found myself now getting a lot of attention for this particular genre, and I still just feel like we're telling stories. It's not that I don't love a good scare, and again, he's so expert at that, that it's a privilege to be a part of. But I never chose it for the genre per se.
We were also in another show recently that's sort of a tricky balance of tone, and that's Leopard Skin, which I feel
Yeah.
like just sort of is a little all over the place in its tone, which is a nice sort of surprise. What was that experience like?
Yeah. Well, Leopard Skin is just, for me, I know that like TV Guide like said this is one of the hidden gems. And I think I still feel like it's hidden. So I really would love it if that could find a larger audience, because I'm so passionate about that piece, and it functions very much like a dream to me, Leopard Skin. And that's what I loved about it, is that it again deals with our darker parts, and sort of how do we bring them to light. And I think, interestingly, both Sebastian Gutierrez and Mike, they're both true auteurs. They write and direct their material. I mean, obviously, The House of Usher was also co-directed by Michael Fimignari, who's, such a long time storyteller with Mike Flanagan as his director of photography. But I do consider Mike an auteur, and certainly Sebastian. And what I love about that is that you have a really distilled vision, and it isn't cookie cutter, and it isn't something that will be for everyone. And that's always what I've gravitated to, both as an artist and as a viewer, is something that you actually don't know where it's going to go. Leopard Skin starts off as this sort of crime thriller, and you think it's going to be about a diamond heist, and it ultimately turns out to be about female empowerment, and sort of getting lost to find yourself. And I think that also came out of COVID, and we shot that during COVID. And once the people who came on board to shoot that came on the property, we filmed there, we ate there, we, slept there, everything. And so nobody left. So it was this kind of pressure cooker, and it felt very, the both Sebastian and Mike, and it's interesting that you brought up Leopard Skin, because I think they both have this innate belief in human beings. So as dark as it gets, it will always come to a place that is about human connection. And Leopard Skin is that to me. So yeah, I absolutely love playing that character, and working with that ensemble as well. And interestingly, that's also repeat people that I've worked with before. So there's something really wonderful about building this kind of repertory group.
you've been in so many different TV shows, which would suggest in some ways it's because they didn't all last very long, which is
Right.
too bad. But do you have a like hidden gem, a previous hidden gem that you just wish people would be talking about more?
I know, I have done a lot of shows that I have loved that haven't had longer lives. And it's funny because I definitely have never wanted to do something for 10 years or whatever. I mean, for me, that's always been, I've always wanted to remain a transformational actor and be somebody that can disappear into a role and not be associated only with one character. So in a way, that was a deliberate choice. And at the same time, there have been things that I have done that I have loved that I wish had a little bit more of a life. Leopard Skin absolutely is one of them. Jett is another one. I mean, Jett is for me one of the favorite characters I've ever gotten to play, and I love Elmore Leonard, and I think that that's so influenced by that, and that I got to sort of channel a little bit of Clint Eastwood, a little bit, just it was just such an unusual character for a woman to play. So I would say Jett, and I would also say a show that Greg Berlanti created called Political Animals that I did with Sigourney Weaver and Ellen Burstyn, Sebastian Stan, and such a wonderful group of actors. Um, and I love that. I love that show, and that was very short-lived. And it's interesting because Karen Sisco was a character I also could have explored for so much longer. It's been an interesting. I don't know if that's karma or like something some sort of meant to be thing for my life that's been the case. But that I got to touch on certain characters that I would have loved to have done for longer. But I also look at it like, oh, good. And I also didn't get to a place where in any way they were by rote, you know. But yes, if there were one show that I wish would be able to have a further seasons that hasn't, I would say it would be Jet.
Well, I have my own answer, and I'm curious if
Tell me.
this show occupies any space in your brain.
Oh, you know what? I was of course going to mention Threshold, so I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's where I met so many cohorts that I love, including Peter Dinklage, who is brilliant in it as he always is, um, and yeah, David Goyer and I got to have it was just that was one of those ones. That was a time I would say for that and Karen Sisco. That was a time when it was really hard for auteurs to do television. It was that moment where people who were, because that was David Heyman and David Goyer, who were both very films, just come from the film world and felt that I think they had been kind of under the impression they could do something that wasn't, um, both that, which was CBS, and Karen Sisco, which was ABC. I think both were in moments where people at those networks were wanting to do something unique, wanting to break out of the mold of network television, but didn't have the capacity to really do it. And so I think that was the fate of Threshold, which is that what I was sold as the show that I was going to do was something that I think David Goyer and David Heyman really had the capacity, we all had the capacity to do it, and there just wasn't the infrastructure for it there. And so yeah, she was a cool character, and it was a great group, and I think that one really just the tip of the iceberg.
When you talk about not spending too much time with the role and things made during COVID, there's also your segment from the Within anthology, which I feel like is
Yes.
another interesting. Everything you do is all so different, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for mentioning that. That's such a that's a true hidden gem. Yeah, we had so much fun. That was during COVID, and Adrienne Palicki, we had worked with her on Women in Trouble and Electrolux, Sebastian Gutierrez and I, and so we were all in Austin at the same time during COVID when nobody could work. And Celine Rattray, a wonderful producer from New York, reached out to several families who she knew there were. If the whole mandate for that was if there were a couple of creative people, preferably a director and an actor, or a couple of actors that one of them wanted to direct, and you could make your own, they would send you equipment and you just make your own little short film, and then it would become a part of this anthology. Cale Fino, who was a long time collaborator, director of photography for Sebastian and I, he came down there, and we actually ended up we couldn't we didn't want to shoot it on an iPhone. We had to shoot it on a real camera, so we wanted it to look good too. But it was a lifesaver in a moment of, as for artists, when you don't get to do your thing, it's really hard. It's sort of, especially for me. I mean, I started doing this when I was 13, and so for the all of my adult life, this is what I've done, and it remains my greatest passion. So that was a really, really fun thing. We had such a blast doing that.
And you had a trailer come out, I think, today for the next project of yours, which I
Yeah.
feel like is probably less horror than the House of Usher, right?
Yeah, well, it's different. It's definitely much more, there's a, do you remember Weird Science? This has a bit of an homage in a flipped way to Weird Science, and certainly also, has some Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands vibes. Diablo Cody, I'm a huge fan, and her writing is so sharp, and she's so friggin' funny. And this one is, yeah, this has a lot more, though Usher has certain camp elements to it, this one is definitely very heightened and very funny, and certainly has some gore. But my character is unlike any character I've ever been offered, and that's why I wanted to jump in and play with them. Also, I really like Zelda Williams so much, and really wanted to support her in making her first feature. And we didn't know each other personally before that. I just upon speaking to her and about her vision for it, I was really excited about it. And it's the most kind of overtly comedic role that I just don't normally get asked to play those kind of roles, so it was really fun for me. Yeah.
You'd also enjoy Gunpowder Milkshake, which again is something that's action. That's something else.
Yeah. Yeah, that was amazing. That was right before COVID, and we shot it in Berlin, I mean, talk about, those women, we just all connected so quickly. We were just it was such a great group, and there's been talk about making a second one of those films, and I think we would all just love to go play together again. So if that opportunity arises, it would be really, really cool.
Is there anything that you haven't done that you want to try sometime soon?
Well, there's a film that I'm incredibly passionate about that I'm in the process of trying to get made right now, which I can't talk about yet, but I love it because it has these classic. I've always been a fan of a really elevated thriller, like a very Patricia Highsmith kind of Hitchcockian. I mean, these are always when those work for me, when they're character driven, but you are on the edge of your seat because you're so involved with the characters. I also always am interested in exploring um sexuality in the complexities of that in that kind of genre, which I feel like Hitchcock did, even though he was dealing with not being able to show a lot. So it's not about the aspect of showing it, but it's just about these sort of primal human nature that we're all dealing with, this sort of animal element of us, and how, Damage, the Louis Malle movie, is one of my favorite movies. And so those sort of kind of international, I feel like, Polanski at different times has made really interesting movies in that vein. And so that's something I'm also dying to get back on the boards, and do a play. I love that. I was doing a really amazing play called Anatomy of a Suicide, written by Alice Birch, who's now also doing beautiful work in series. Um, but that got shut down in the last weekend right before COVID, and so I'm sort of yearning to do that again. I don't know, Abe, there's so much. I literally can't believe I've been doing it for as long as I have, and still feel like I've just touched the surface of what I want to do. So those are a couple of things.
Well, I hope those go well, and let's talk more about Gunpowder Milkshake 2 and Threshold reboot, which
Here,
I'd love
here.
that. I'd love to, I don't think that's happening, but it'd be nice if it.
You never know these days.
That's true. Well, for more great conversations like this, please subscribe to the Cinema Daily US YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Carla, for your time. This
Thank
was
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.